Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. Today I wanted to share with you 5 pieces of advice to help you become a better graphic designer today. So I've lovingly called these 5 pieces of advice the 5 don'ts, and these things will help you dramatically improve your ability to create unique, refreshing, inspired logos, whether for personal projects or for client projects that you're working on. So let's dive right in. Tip number 1, don't be so literal in your design decisions. I've seen this trend lately where designers, especially those just getting started, have a tendency to create a logo that is either based off of the first letter of the brand's name, or the logo is an abbreviation of the brand's name. For example, if you were creating a logo for a brand called Cats Galore that specializes in selling products for cats targeted towards cat lovers, many beginning designers would be tempted to simply create a logo CG, standing for Cats Galore, and then maybe implement some sort of cat-related design, whether it was a paw print or a silhouette of a cat. Now, this approach to logo design isn't necessarily bad or wrong, simply it feels a little bit uninspired to me. And I think that as designers, we can do better than just creating a logo that is an abbreviation of the brand name or based off of the first letter of that brand's name. When you think about it, a logo is just a representation, a symbol, a mark that represents what a brand stands for. Therefore, a logo shouldn't spell out and explain what a brand does. It should simply represent the values of that brand. Tip number 2 goes along with tip number 1. Don't be afraid to make an abstract or out-of-the-box logo. As I mentioned with tip number 1, a logo is simply a symbol that represents a brand. It therefore doesn't need to explain what the brand does. When you think about some of the most powerful logos, not only are they simple at conveying a message, but they are a little bit abstract. Take, for example, the Nike swoosh. When Nike was creating this logo, they didn't simply stick with their word mark, Nike, even though that does look really great. Notice also how Nike didn't just go with the letter N for their logo mark, like another sportswear brand that shall remain nameless. Rather, what Nike did is they went with the now iconic swoosh. Now, the Nike swoosh, it doesn't spell out and explain what Nike as a brand does. Rather, it represents their values. It represents athletes. It represents motion. It represents forward thinking. And that's what makes this logo so powerful and iconic, to the point where if Nike is doing an advertising campaign, all they need to do is include the swoosh, and you automatically know that it's Nike. Some other examples of some really, really interesting logos are BMW, Adidas, Pepsi, Starbucks, MasterCard, Evernote, and the Rolling Stones. What each of these logos have in common is that they don't explain the brand, they don't explain the product or service. They're symbolic, they're a little bit abstract, and they're incredibly memorable in our minds. Tip number 3 is don't get your inspiration from other designers' finished logos. While it can be incredibly helpful to browse different logo designers' work on Dribbble and Behance and other sites like these shouldn't be our main sources of reference when we're getting inspiration for our own logo projects. The reason for this is we want to create logos that are unique, that are outside the box, that are different from what people have seen before. And if we're just simply designing what's currently on trend or what we see from other designers on sites like Behance, we rob ourselves of the opportunity to create something truly memorable and truly amazing. Now, I will use these sites from time to time to see what other designers are up to. I like using these sites to share my own work, and it's also helpful to see the way that professional designers organize and lay out their different projects. Other than that, I try to stay away from these sites when getting inspiration for my own logos. Now, you might ask, well, what are the best sources of inspiration? And it really depends on the project you're working on. Each logo that you design should have an associated design brief with it. This design brief should outline who the brand is that you're working for. It should talk about their core values as a brand, what makes them different and unique. The brief should also describe where the logo is going to be used, what it's going to be used for, and who the end target audience is. When you have this information, you can then go find the right sources of inspiration for that logo. To give you an example, if the company that you're designing for is, let's say that they are a hipster outdoor clothing brand, and they're passionate about all things retro, then what you might do is harness the power of the internet to identify different things that were created and designed in the 60s and in the 70s, kind of during this hippie movement. You might research book covers from that era. You might look at movie poster designs. You might look at different clothing brands during that era and what their print and TV ads look like. You might even go to Pinterest and look up maybe a 70s color palette or 70s outfits that people were wearing. And you can use the internet to really gain a lot of inspiration from different eras, if that resonates with the brand you're designing for. Other sources of inspiration could include going to a museum, could include going to a library and checking out books from certain eras. Really, the sources are limitless. Really, though, it depends on the client that you're designing for and what's outlined in their design brief. Tip number 4 is don't go crazy with colors and gradients. When I'm first creating a logo, I always start in black and white, and then I add on colors sparingly, as needed. Oftentimes, what we do as designers is we rely on color to make a logo interesting, unique, or different, when in reality, the best logos should be unique and different and great in black or white. One thing that's important to remember is that logos are not illustrations. They don't need to have a ton of color jam-packed into them. We can save color for a later time. We can save color for things like websites and packaging and advertisements. But when it comes down to the logo mark, we want to keep it ultra simple, ultra refined, and we want it to stand out if it's black or white. As a rule of thumb, when I'm implementing color, I use one primary color and then 2 secondary colors. My goal is to not overwhelm the logo with color and to rather focus on the core basics that make the logo great. One thing that will be tempting is to use a lot of shadows and gradients and different transparencies to help different aspects of the logo stand out from one another. In all reality, I think it's better to utilize negative space and to look at how you can create a logo that does well and stands on its own in black or white. Tip number 5, don't sketch out just one idea. When you're in the brainstorm and idea generation phase for your logo, don't just sketch out one idea and move forward with that. My recommendation for you is to try to sketch out at least 20 different varieties, versions, and ideas for the logo. And really try and push the boundaries here. Make the logo as simple as you possibly can, and then make it as complex as you possibly can. Explore every idea in between and try out multiple different things. The best logos are combinations of multiple different ideas mixed together in a simple and refined way. But when you're in the idea generation phase, as long as you have paper in your sketchbook or space on your tablet, you might as well come up with as many ideas as humanly possible. The reason for this is the more ideas you have, the better chance you have at striking gold and stumbling on an idea that's truly significant and memorable and different. So those are my 5 tips for you today. If you can avoid these simple mistakes, I think you'll have a much better chance of creating logos that are really memorable and really interesting. If you found today's video to be insightful or helpful, please consider hitting that like button. And while you're there, go ahead and subscribe to the channel because I'm creating videos like this each week where I share with you tips to help you become a better designer. I also share tips, tricks, and ideas on all things creativity in my weekly newsletter titled Creativity Weekly. This newsletter is for designers and creators of any type who are simply looking to become more creative. I just send 1 email per week. It's super simple, right to the point, and it will help you become a more creative person. So the link for that is in the description. Go ahead and sign up for that newsletter today. You'll find it to be massively beneficial. So that's it for today's video. Thanks so much for watching and stay swell.